So this will be volume 2 of my series in which we cover James Dolan and I would say the beginning building blocks of what's going to end up causing the Knicks at some point to leave MSG. And again, we're going to break this down layer by layer, as in volume 1 we've seen James Dolan beef with Adam Silver over the details of the new NBA TV deal, which ends up undercutting the whole business model of MSG Networks as the whole league overall struggles with the local TV business. And James Dolan's MSG Networks is the only self-made profitable local RSN business. Other teams like the Lakers have partnership deals with other TV networks to broadcast their games. But again, MSG Networks is what really gave the Knicks leverage over a lot of the NBA teams, pretty much the whole league overall, when it came to them not necessarily caring too much about how deep they got into the luxury tax. But as the NBA enters this new TV deal with Amazon, NBC, and ESPN, at some point during the regular season, there's going to be nationally televised games happening pretty much almost every single day of the week. And this is definitely going to have an effect on James Dolan's business model. But we're going to break this down layer by layer, and part 1 is in the description below. But first, we're going to hear what James Dolan had to say on the matter. And also, we're going to hear later on from Mark Cuban as he exposes the new business model and how owners are looking at teams going forward in the future. And he really lays out what it means to be an owner, as now they will be participating in more of the real estate business as well as the on-court business of owning a team. Like I said, we're going to break this down layer by layer. And first, we're going to start off with James Dolan. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Team sponsors and partners would no longer be protected during national broadcasts, which undercuts the premium that member team sponsors can be charged for being the sole third party promoted in a specific sponsorship category. These changes drastically increase the challenges associated with attracting and renewing vital sponsorship revenue by creating a particularly unfriendly environment for member team sponsors. The 42 million homes that have abandoned traditional paid television over an 8-year period, and how those losses, which include a 45% decline for the Knicks MSG network, have been compounded by the league's new streaming and television deals. The league's new national deal renders the regional sports networks unviable. Teams depend on revenue received from local rights fees and on increased fan engagement through high-quality broadcasts that provide dedicated and tailored coverage for local audiences. Yet the proposal threatens to completely eliminate regional sports networks without a comparable replacement offered by the league and no articulated plans to address the production and distribution vacuum that the league will inevitably create in its quest to further disrupt the RSN industry.
Now right there, James Dolan, I gotta admit, is a little tone deaf because the RSN industry is in complete shambles. You got Kevin Durant down in Phoenix every single night, is free as long as people within Arizona have an antenna. The same thing will apply for teams like the Utah Jazz. We've seen the Houston Rockets as well as the Dallas Mavericks link up with MLB teams to form their own apps to at least get their games distributed to their fans. So one of the main distributors for the NBA for teams' local games have actually filed for bankruptcy. Along with the parent company of TNT, Warner Brothers, they completely checked out of that business. So the way Adam Silver constructed the brand new TV deal is very similar to the NFL style, where each team is more accessible, in the NFL's case publicly broadcasted, and the revenues are shared among all teams equally. And this is exactly what's rubbing James Dolan the wrong way, because he was outvoted by basically every NBA owner because their pockets are hurting in that business, except for James Dolan. Good old Jim is on an island by himself, but he had more to say.
The increased number of exclusive and non-exclusive games means that national partners would have the ability to air nearly half of the regular season and all postseason games. This reduction in available games for RSNs risks rendering the entire RSN model unviable. The inclusion of streaming partners in the proposal like Amazon Prime Video and Peacock allows fans in all NBA markets to bypass their local networks to watch certain games in their market. The proposal offers no local protections for RSN networks. We trust that our concerns are shared by many of our counterparts across the league, each of whom will be similarly impacted. The league will say that it does not matter because your franchise value will continue to rise, that contemplates you will eventually sell. Once again, pride of ownership is what is sacrificed. We are well on our way to becoming a one-size-fits-all, characterless organization. Just remember we did this on the backs of owners like Jerry Buss.
Now, it's very interesting right there that James Dolan had bought up Jerry Buss, one of the NBA owners that was really a visionary and a pioneer, as he brought in cheerleading and also the Hollywood aspect to the Los Angeles Lakers. He's sort of one of these owners that really integrated his NBA franchise within a city and highlighted the more entertainment side of what the game could bring. And the Dolan family, in a way, have been very creative on how they structured MSG Networks and created their own in-house production where they have full control of revenue coming in, thus giving them a leg up on almost 99% of the NBA pool. But the only misstep in that business model is MSG Networks being tied to cable, which has a disappearing audience, especially for younger viewers that the NBA is really targeting. And that's why the NBA has constructed their new deals with streaming, where younger audience are already on. They may have Amazon Prime. They're already on apps that have the NFL like Peacock and NBC, giving them the choice of viewing games while not necessarily being tied to cable bundling. And this has always been the flaw at MSG Networks being so tied to the cable bundle. Even now in their pivot with the New York Yankees and the Yes Network, they've consolidated and created a Gotham app where you can have both networks for $42 a month or $360 a year, which is still higher than the MLB and NBA package. Fans can just grab those and have access to more games. They still quite have not found a middle ground to getting fans the games at a decent price, while at the same time not necessarily undercutting the cable bundle, which they make a shit ton of money off of. And all this consolidation is happening after MSG in the last 8 years experienced a 45% decline. And that decline includes a number of people who subscribed to cable but didn't necessarily watch the Knicks because they were forced to grab that package. You see, that business model right there is dying. And eventually down the line, it's going to be gone. And in part 1 of this series, we talked about how the Golden State Warriors actually have a whole facility around their stadium. So their owners perfectly combine the on-court revenue as well as the real estate revenue that comes with a lot of tax benefits. This is why I'm saying we're beginning to see the moving pieces that's going to contribute to the Knicks at least considering leaving MSG, because sports franchises overall have begun to tap into this ecosystem. In Atlanta, they have the Battery, which is a whole nother area of shopping, fine dining, and you can watch the games, and it's another ecosystem around the team. Same thing for Patriots Place in New England. Hell, even out in Milwaukee, they have Deer Park. And of course, by the Cowboy Stadium, they have Texas Live, which is a whole facility in itself. It's almost like a whole nother arena. And FIFA, instead of giving New York and MetLife the finals for the World Cup, they strongly consider giving it to Jerry Jones and putting it in Cowboys World because of the Texas Live facility, which they'll have a whole nother ecosystem to create revenue outside of selling tickets for the finals. Even the St. Louis Cardinals have tapped into this blueprint with Ballpark Village next to their arena. But what really puts this all together, when you have the real estate, the fine dining, perhaps room for hotels where fans could fly in from around the world, come to the games, what kind of puts all this together is the gambling aspect, the pending legalization of gambling, especially in places like California, Texas. All these teams become medallions, very similar to the New York City taxis. They become medallions for possible casinos. And now you see where this is kind of going. It's almost like they want fans to take a trip. They can actually stay in a hotel, then go shopping, fine dining, and they can walk across the street to the stadium. All in one go. This is where this is headed. And of course, they're going to gamble in the same facility. And now this is where we're going to hear from Mark Cuban on why he sold the team. Keep in mind, he sold the Mavericks to major gambling operators out in Vegas. So they're jumping in, grabbing a piece of Texas real estate early. And each sports franchise represent a medallion for almost having legalization of just operating an in-house casino. But let's check out what Mark Cuban had to say on what it really means in the future to be an NBA owner.
So I sold 3/4 of them, not the whole thing. I still own 27.7% for a couple of reasons. One, when I first bought in 2000, I was the tech guy in the NBA. I was the media guy. You know, broadcast.com just sold it. HDNet just created the very first ever high definition television network. I had every edge in every angle. Now, fast forward 24 years later, in order to sustain growth, to be able to compete with the new collective bargaining agreement, you have to have other sources of revenue. And so you see other teams, and all sports for that matter, talking about casinos, talking about doing real estate development,
all this, yeah.
hotel. That's just not me. I wasn't going to put up $2 billion to get an education on building.
And that right there is where the business is headed towards. So those of you in the tri-state area understand that MSG is on top of an MTA property. And for James Dolan to have that ecosystem, and as an arena is also operating under a old tax loophole that they're grandfathered in, and also with limited spacing, you're seeing where James Dolan is between a rock and a hard place. Again, they undercut his cash cow outside of the team, which is MSG Networks. And now he doesn't necessarily have that edge to keep up with other teams with increasing revenue, especially the Golden State Warriors. We've seen their net worth jump up almost on the same level as the Cowboys in just a few short years. But again, this is why we're seeing such frustration from James Dolan when it comes to Adam Silver and the way he's constructed everything, and James Dolan constantly going back and forth with Adam for almost every little detail. Any new changes, James Dolan's going at his neck. We've even seen him complain about the cost of the WNBA and also the in-season tournament, and also having camps around the world. These type of questionings about those budgets is really James Dolan getting under Adam Silver's skin. He's really pissed off about them undercutting MSG Networks. And with all this petty back and forth, there are other trickle downs. As we've seen, the league had investigated Rick Brunson on his promotion with the New York Knicks, and also how quickly they launched an investigation into the Jalen Brunson signing. But they didn't have that same energy when Anthony Davis had joined Clutch Sports when he played for the Pelicans, and all of a sudden he wanted to go to the Lakers. The league just didn't launch one investigation to Rick Brunson's promotion. It happened numerous times, even though he had experienced assistant coaching since the mid-2000s. Hell, even recently in 2018 with the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's a bunch of Cold War games going on, but here's Rick Brunson on his coaching experience.
Like, I'm a coach. People forget, man. I'm a coach. I've been coaching
since 2007.
No, actually, I've been coaching before that because I never really played. So me sitting there, I used to study. If you look at any tape when I would play for the Knicks, I was always sitting next to Tibbs. So it was always a coach mentality. I was always trying to help my teammate. If I see things, I would tell them. So like my first year, like I felt like the whole year I'm like trying to prove myself like I'm a coach. Like I'm not his dad. That's how I took it. And I would say the only time that I get dad mode is when like he embarrassed himself. Like when he starts acting like this guy, yelling and screaming at referees. They both have that trait. And I get it. Like you could like get worse.
Rick Brunson having all that coaching experience warrants an investigation 2 times, but Anthony Davis signing up with Rich Paul and Clutch Sports, all of a sudden wanting to go to the Lakers, does not even warrant one investigation. It's unfortunate, but James Dolan, when it comes to his Cold War with Adam Silver, he's on an island by himself. He was outvoted by pretty much all the NBA owners, as their pockets are hurting from the local TV deals. They are not seeing the same amount of revenue as James Dolan. I believe the Lakers are one of the few teams that actually have a somewhat lucrative deal, but not on the same level as the Knicks, but they have a deal with Time Warner Cable. But again, remember, they don't have their own network where they actually see the revenue. They just get handed a check. But James Dolan, on the other hand, they have control of their whole operation. And I've always wondered how the other NBA owners always felt about James Dolan having a publicly traded company with MSG. Just the structure of that, even though the NBA is a privately owned company. Because this TV deal deeply impacts that stock evaluation. In a way, the Knicks would have to become, I don't want to say a tanking team, but they would have to be a losing team for MSG to actually have dibs on all their games. Because make no mistake about it, if the Knicks are good, Peacock, Amazon, and ESPN is going to want those games streamed on their network. And as James Dolan stated, it's going to affect their advertisers and the rates that they can get for those ads. Let's take a look at what Dolan had to say about it.
The league's proposal would also have a negative impact on the value of each member team's local sponsorships, including the delivery of camera-visible benefits at as few as 23 home games, roughly 20% reduction to what was historically provided. Team sponsors and partners would no longer be protected during national broadcasts, which undercuts the premium that member team sponsors can be charged for being the sole third party promoted in a specific sponsorship category. These changes drastically increase the challenges associated with attracting and renewing vital sponsorship revenue by creating a particularly unfriendly environment for member team sponsors.
It sounds like James Dolan's going to have a tough time grabbing those MSG Lexus commercials. That's one of the sponsors right there. They're not going to be too happy actually paying the same amount for less games. And also at the same time, if the game goes national, they're going to be competing against the sponsors that ESPN have deals with. This is a very unique situation, but James Dolan definitely does not have the leverage. And with MSG being on top of an MTA property, there is definitely almost no room to expand. Everything else in the city is already tight. You start to see in the future, how is James Dolan going to be competing with other teams like the Golden State Warriors when it comes to revenue? And that's why I say this might be the start of the dominoes falling, and for MSG Networks as well as James Dolan to consider a move. But we'll see how it plays out. The Cold War between Adam Silver and James Dolan, I expect this to continue. Hell, we might get more second round draft picks taken away, and also certain personnel on the coaching staff or front office might be randomly investigated. But we'll see. These are interesting times, and for James Dolan, generational wealth definitely requires generational pivots.